Her breath caught as the gun pressed cold against her temple, but it wasn't fear that made her tremble, it was him, the man they called the Ghost. Korea's most dangerous mafia boss stood inches away, tattooed hands stained with blood, dark eyes burning into hers like he'd found something he didn't know he'd been hunting. One wrong move and she'd die, one right move and she'd lose herself forever. In that moment, between death and desire, Naomi David realized the truth. She hadn't stumbled into his world by accident, she'd been chosen. Welcome to Mafia Stories, where mafia bosses rule the night, power is earned in blood, and love is the most dangerous weapon. Subscribe and enter a world where bosses rise, hearts fall, and secrets destroy empires. The warehouse reeked of gasoline and fear. Naomi's hands shook as she clutched her camera, her assignment editor's voice still ringing in her ears. Get the story, get proof, get out. She'd followed the tip about illegal weapons smuggling to this abandoned building on Seoul's industrial edge, expecting to find corrupt officials or low-level criminals. Instead, she'd walked into something far more dangerous. Through the crack in the shipping container, she watched them, dozens of men in black tactical gear, surrounding a single figure who stood with his back to her. Even from behind, his presence dominated the space. Broad shoulders, perfectly tailored black suit, and ink crawling up his neck in intricate patterns that disappeared beneath his collar. Her camera clicked. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Every head turned. Run, her instinct screamed, but her legs wouldn't move. The man in the center turned slowly, deliberately, and Naomi's breath stopped. He was Korean, maybe 30, with sharp aristocratic features that belonged on magazine covers, not in criminal undergrounds. High cheekbones, full lips set in a cruel line, and eyes so dark they looked black in the dim light. Tattoos snaked up both sides of his neck, dragons and chrysanthemums in traditional Korean style. He was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. He was also walking straight toward her. Bring her to me, his voice cut through the silence like silk over steel. Rough hands grabbed Naomi from behind. She fought, kicked, screamed, but they dragged her into the light like an offering. The man, their boss, clearly studied her with unsettling intensity. His gaze traveled from her terrified face down her curvy figure in her simple jeans and jacket, then back up to her eyes. Something shifted in his expression: surprise, recognition, hunger. A reporter, one of his men said, holding up her press badge. Should we? No, the word was absolute. The boss stepped closer, so close Naomi could smell his expensive cologne mixed with gunpowder. What's your name? Go to hell, she spat, surprising herself. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Brave, foolish, but brave. He reached out and Naomi flinched, but he only tucked a strand of her dark coiled hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. I asked you a question. Naomi's Naomi David. Naomi? He repeated her name like he was tasting it, memorizing it. I'm Li Wei, and you've just made a very dangerous mistake. That night Naomi should have died. Li Wei's reputation was legendary in Seoul's underworld, the ghost who left no witnesses, the mafia boss who'd built his empire on ruthlessness and blood. He'd eliminated rivals, crushed rebellions, and ruled his territory with an iron fist since he was 23. Mercy wasn't in his vocabulary. Yet he let her live. More than that, he had her followed home, her apartment secured, her safety ensured. His men watched from the shadows as she stumbled into her tiny studio, still shaking, and collapsed on her bed. Through the cameras he'd already had installed, a violation she didn't yet know about, Li Wei watched her sleep. He couldn't explain the feeling that had struck him when she'd looked at him with those defiant brown eyes. It was like being electrocuted and drowned simultaneously. Like every empty space inside him suddenly ached to be filled. Like he'd been asleep his entire life and she'd woken him with a single glance. Obsession, his second-in-command would call it. Destiny, his grandmother would say. Madness, he told himself, pouring another glass of whiskey in his penthouse office. But madness didn't stop him from pulling up every piece of information on Naomi David. 26 years old, Nigerian immigrant who'd moved to Seoul for journalism school, graduated top of her class, worked for a small investigative news outlet, lived alone, no family in Korea, spent her weekends volunteering at a community center. She was good, pure, everything his world tried to destroy. And he wanted her with a violence that terrified him. The next morning, Naomi found her apartment door unlocked. Her heart hammered as she pushed it open, expecting carnage. Instead, she found a single black box on her kitchen counter, tied with red silk. Inside, a new camera top of the line worth more than 6 months of her salary and a note in elegant handwriting. For your next story, choose your subjects more carefully. LW. She should have been terrified. She should have gone to the police, packed her bags, fled the country. Instead, she felt something dangerous flutter in her chest. He knew where she lived. He could have killed her. He'd given her a gift instead. Absolutely not, she told herself, throwing the note away. But she kept the camera. A few days later, she was assigned to cover a charity gala at Seoul's most exclusive hotel. The elite of Korean society would be there, celebrities, politicians, business moguls. Naomi wore her only formal dress, a deep burgundy that hugged her curves and made her feel simultaneously beautiful and out of place. She was photographing a famous actress when she felt it, that prickling awareness of being watched. She turned and her heart stopped. Li Wei stood across the ballroom in a midnight blue tuxedo that looked custom-made for his lean, muscular frame. His tattoos were hidden now, his dark hair styled perfectly, his expression unreadable. He looked like he belonged here, like royalty among commoners, and he was staring directly at her. Their eyes locked, the room seemed to tilt. He started walking toward her and Naomi's survival instincts finally kicked in. She fled through a side door down a corridor into an empty conference room. She pressed her back against the door, breathing hard. "Running from me already," his voice came from inside the room. Naomi spun. Li Wei stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking amused and predatory. "How did you?" "I own this hotel." He moved closer with the grace of a stalking cat. "I own half this city. Did you really think you could hide from me?" "What do you want?" Her voice shook despite her best efforts. "You know what I want." The raw honesty in his tone made her shiver. He stopped a foot away, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I've tried to stay away. I've tried to convince myself this is temporary insanity, but I can't stop thinking about you, Naomi. I can't sleep. I can't focus. You've infected me." "That's not my problem," she whispered, even as her traitorous body leaned toward him. "No." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Then why are you trembling? Why did you keep my gift? Why did you run instead of screaming for security?" Because she felt it too, this impossible, magnetic pull. Because no one had ever looked at her the way he did, like she was precious and dangerous and absolutely essential. Because despite everything she knew about him, about what he did, some broken part of her wanted to lean into his touch and never let go. "I'm not one of your possessions," she said instead. "No," he agreed, his voice dropping lower. "You're something far more dangerous. You're mine by choice, not by force, and that's exactly what terrifies me." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. His expression hardened as he read the message, and just like that, the vulnerable man disappeared behind the Mafia boss's mask. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "Stay away from the eastern docks, there's going to be trouble." "What kind of?" "Stay away," he gripped her shoulders, intensity burning in his eyes. "Promise me, Naomi." She should have refused, she should have asked questions. Instead, she found herself nodding, helpless against the genuine fear she saw in his face, fear for her. He kissed her forehead, quick and possessive, then disappeared into the night. The following week, Li Wei appeared everywhere Naomi went. At the cafe where she worked on articles, he'd be in the corner booth, laptop open, looking like any other professional. At the market where she shopped, his car would idle nearby, black and imposing. At the community center where she volunteered with immigrant children, he donated an obscene amount of money anonymously. But she knew. He was courting her the only way he knew how, with presence, protection, and resources. "This is stalking," she told him one evening when she found him waiting outside her apartment building. "This is courtship," he corrected, falling into step beside her. He carried her groceries despite her protests, his tattooed hands careful with her bags. "In my world, when a man wants a woman, he shows her he can provide, protect, and prioritize her above everything else." "I don't need protection." "You do, actually." His tone turned serious. "My enemies know about you now. Being close to me puts a target on your back." Fear sliced through her, "Then stay away." "I can't." The raw admission hung between them. "Believe me, Naomi, I've tried, but I'd rather guard you myself than leave you vulnerable and hope for the best. You're in danger because of me, that makes you my responsibility." "I'm not your responsibility." "You're everything." The words burst out of him like they'd been caged too long. Li Wei stopped walking, turning to face her fully. You're everything I shouldn't want and the only thing I can't stop craving. You're good and brave and you look at me like I'm a man instead of a monster. Do you have any idea how rare that is, how addictive? Naomi's heart pounded. Li Wei. Let me protect you, he said quietly. That's all I'm asking. Let me make sure you're safe. If you still hate me after, I'll disappear from your life, I promise. She should have said no. Every rational thought screamed at her to run. But there was something devastating about this powerful, dangerous man looking at her with such desperate honesty. And God help her, she didn't hate him. She should, but she didn't. 1 month, she heard herself say. You have 1 month to prove you're more than what I saw in that warehouse. If you can't, you walk away. Deal. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. Deal. Later that night, Naomi agreed to attend a work colleague's birthday party at a trendy Seoul nightclub. She wore a fitted black dress that showcased her curves, her natural hair styled in beautiful twists. She felt confident, beautiful, free. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and for a few hours she let herself forget about mafia bosses and dangerous attractions. Then Minyu appeared. He was a photographer from a rival news outlet, charming and persistent. He'd asked Naomi out 3 times and she'd politely declined 3 times. Tonight, emboldened by alcohol, he tried again. One dance, he said, taking her hand. What's the harm? Before Naomi could refuse, Minyu was spinning her onto the dance floor, his hands settling on her waist. Too familiar, too close. She was about to push him away when the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Li Wei materialized out of the crowd like a demon summoned by jealousy itself. He was dressed all in black shirt, black pants, tattoos visible at his collar and wrists. He looked deadly, furious. His dark eyes were locked on Minyu's hands touching Naomi, and the rage in his expression made her stomach flip. Remove your hands, Li Wei said quietly, or I'll remove them for you. Minyu paled, finally recognizing who he was dealing with. His hands dropped like Naomi was made of fire. I didn't know she was. Mine, Li Wei finished, his voice like gravel. She's mine, and if I ever see you touch her again, you'll wish you'd never been born. Minyu fled. The crowd parted. Li Wei closed the distance between himself and Naomi, his hands cupping her face with barely controlled intensity. Are you trying to kill me? He demanded, his voice rough. Watching another man's hands on you. You don't own me, she shot back, even as her pulse raced. My heart would disagree. His thumb traced her bottom lip, his eyes dark with possession and something deeper. I know I don't own you, I know you're your own person, but Naomi, I am trying very, very hard to be civilized about this consuming need I have for you, and watching him touch what's mine makes me want to burn this entire building down. That's crazy, she whispered. Yes, he agreed simply, you make me crazy. And then he was kissing her, desperate, demanding, devastating. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and Naomi melted into him because denying this any longer was impossible. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and intensity, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Li Wei pressed his forehead to hers. Come home with me, he murmured. Let me show you what you do to me. Let me worship you the way you deserve. Every rational thought told her to refuse. But Naomi had stopped being rational the moment she'd looked into his eyes in that warehouse. Okay, she breathed, take me home. Li Wei's penthouse was a study in luxury and control, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, minimalist furniture in blacks and grays, expensive art on the walls. But Naomi barely noticed. She was too focused on the way Li Wei was looking at her as he poured them both wine, his hands steady despite the tension vibrating through his frame. You can still leave, he said quietly, offering her the glass. I'll have my driver take you home, no questions, no consequences. Do you want me to leave? God, no, the admission was raw. But I need you to be sure, Naomi, because once I have you, I won't be able to let go. I won't be able to pretend this is casual or temporary. You'll be mine and I'll be yours, and there's no going back from that. She set down her wine glass and crossed to him, her heart pounding. Then don't let me go. Something in him shattered. Li Wei pulled her against him, kissing her with desperate hunger. His hands explored her curves like he was memorizing her, reverent and possessive at once. He lifted her effortlessly, and Naomi wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her to his bedroom. "Beautiful," he murmured against her skin, laying her on silk sheets. "So goddamn beautiful, mine." "Yours," she agreed, breathless, pulling him down to her. What happened next was a blur of sensation and emotion, his hands removing her dress with shaking fingers, her nails scraping down his tattooed back, whispered words of praise and possession, their bodies learning each other with desperate intensity. Li Wei worshipped every inch of her like she was sacred, like touching her was both prayer and benediction. And when they finally came together, when he buried his face in her neck and groaned her name like a man found religion, Naomi understood why people wrote poetry about moments like this. It wasn't just physical. It was cosmic. It was two broken pieces clicking into place and becoming whole. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, Naomi felt something crack open inside her. She was in love with him. With a mafia boss? A criminal, a man with blood on his hands and darkness in his soul, but also a man who looked at her like she hung the stars, who protected her without question, who'd let himself be vulnerable in a way she suspected he never had before. She was in love, and it terrified her. Dawn crept through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. Li Wei was still asleep, his face relaxed in a way she'd never seen, one tattooed arm draped possessively across her waist. He looked younger like this, almost innocent. And Naomi realized what a colossal mistake she'd made. This wouldn't work, couldn't work. He was a criminal lord with enemies and violence and a life that would eventually consume her. She was a journalist who believed in truth and justice and the law. They were impossible. And worse, she was falling for him so hard it physically hurt. Before she could talk herself out of it, Naomi carefully extracted herself from his embrace. She dressed quickly, quietly, tears burning her eyes. On his nightstand, she left a simple note. "I can't do this, I'm sorry, N." Then she fled like the coward she was, leaving behind the only man who'd ever made her feel truly seen. Li Wei woke to cold sheets and devastating silence. For a moment, he thought Naomi was in the bathroom, then he saw the note and something inside him fractured. He read it 3 times, each word a knife twisting deeper. "I can't do this, I'm sorry." No explanation, no goodbye, just abandonment. He'd bared his soul to her, shown her parts of himself he'd buried years ago, given her power that could destroy him, and she'd run. The rejection burned worse than any bullet wound, cut deeper than any betrayal. But beneath the pain was something darker, determination. She was his, she'd said it last night, breathless and perfect in his arms. He'd felt her walls crumble, seen her fall just as hard as he had. Whatever fear drove her away, he'd prove it wrong. Li Wei reached for his phone. "Find her," he told his second in command. "I don't care where she goes, I want eyes on her every second." "Boss. Now." Within an hour, he knew she'd gone to her apartment, packed a bag and fled to a friend's place across the city, running from him, hiding from what they'd shared. It wouldn't work, he'd chase her to the ends of the earth if necessary. 3 days passed with Naomi successfully avoiding Li Wei. She'd taken emergency leave from work, stayed at her friend Yejin's apartment, kept her phone off. She told herself she was being smart, protecting herself from inevitable heartbreak. But every night she dreamed of tattooed hands and whispered promises, waking up aching and alone. On the 4th day, Yejin answered a knock at the door. "Naomi," she called nervously, "there's someone here for you." Naomi's heart stopped. She emerged from the bedroom to find Li Wei standing in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, but the intensity in his gaze was sharper than ever. "You and I need to talk," he said quietly. It wasn't a request. "How did you find me?" "I'll always find you." He stepped inside and Yejin wisely disappeared into her bedroom. "Why did you run?" "Because this is insane." The words burst out of Naomi like a dam breaking. "You're a criminal, Li Wei, a mafia boss, you hurt people, you break laws, and I'm falling in love with you and it's destroying me because I don't know how to reconcile who you are with what I feel." Silence crashed down. Li Wei stared at her like she'd shot him. "Say that again." "Which part?" "The part where you're falling in love with me." He moved closer, hope and hunger warring in his expression. "Say it again, Naomi." "It doesn't matter," she whispered, tears spilling over. "It doesn't change anything, we're impossible." "Nothing about this is impossible." His hands cupped her face, thumbs wiping away her tears with devastating gentleness. "You think I don't know what I am? You think I'm not terrified of tainting you? But Naomi, I would burn my entire empire to ash before I let you go. I would walk away from everything, the power, the money, the life, if it meant keeping you." "You don't mean that." "Try me." His voice was raw. "Give me a reason, give me you, and I'll prove that loving you matters more than anything else in this world." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted it so badly it physically hurt. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," his forehead pressed against hers. "I'm terrified you'll realize you deserve better. I'm terrified my enemies will use you against me. I'm terrified I'll mess this up because I've never loved anyone before and I don't know the rules, but I'm more terrified of losing you. So please, please don't run, stay, fight with me, yell at me, challenge me, but don't leave me." Naomi's resistance crumbled. She pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like tears and second chances, and Li Wei held her like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "Okay," she breathed against his lips. "Okay, I'll stay." The relief in his eyes was devastating. The next few weeks were the happiest of Naomi's life. Li Wei kept his promise. He was still the feared mafia boss in the shadows, but with her he was someone different, softer, real. He showed up at her apartment with food when she forgot to eat, sat through her favorite movies without complaint, listened to her stories about work with genuine interest. He made her laugh, made her feel cherished, made her believe in impossible things. But the danger never truly disappeared. One evening, Naomi was leaving the community center late when a black van screeched to a stop beside her. Before she could scream, rough hands grabbed her, a cloth pressed over her mouth, and darkness swallowed her whole. She woke in a cold warehouse, ironic, given where she'd first met Li Wei, tied to a chair, head pounding. 3 men stood nearby, speaking in rapid Korean she could barely follow. But she caught enough: rival gang, leverage, kill her to hurt the ghost. Terror iced through her veins. Then one of them made a call. "We have her," he said in Korean. "The reporter. If you want her back alive, you'll hand over the Eastern Territory." Even through her fear, Naomi felt a spark of fury. She wasn't a bargaining chip, she wasn't some helpless prize to be traded. But before she could say anything, the man's expression changed. Whatever Li Wei said on the other end made him go pale. "He's bluffing," one of the others said nervously. "He wouldn't." The warehouse door exploded inward. Li Wei entered like an avenging angel wrapped in darkness. He wore all black, tattoos visible at his throat, a gun in each hand, and an expression of such cold fury that even Naomi's captors stumbled backward. Behind him, 24 of his men flooded in, armed and efficient. The fight was brief and brutal. Li Wei moved with lethal precision, putting bullets in kneecaps and shoulders, painful but not fatal because he wanted them to suffer. When the last captor fell, groaning, Li Wei was already at Naomi's side, cutting through her restraints with shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, frantic, his hands checking her for injuries. "Did they touch you, did they?" "I'm okay," she assured him, though her wrists were raw and her body ached. "Li Wei, I'm okay." He pulled her against him so hard it hurt, his face buried in her hair. She felt him trembling. This powerful, dangerous man was shaking with relief and residual terror. "If they'd hurt you," he whispered against her skin, "I would have razed this city to the ground. I would have killed everyone who'd ever known them. I would have." "I know," she held him tighter. "I know, but I'm safe. You saved me." That night, Li Wei refused to let her out of his sight. He took her back to his penthouse, personally tended to her bruised wrists, made her tea, wrapped her in his softest blanket. And then he sat across from her, elbows on his knees, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. Naomi's heart dropped. "What?" "I can't keep pretending this is casual. I can't keep lying to myself that I could survive losing you." He looked up, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You were taken because of me. You were hurt because I was selfish enough to keep you in my life. And I should let you go. I should walk away and let you find someone safe and normal and good." "Don't you dare," Naomi said fiercely. "Don't you dare make that choice for me." "Then what do you want?" The question was desperate. Tell me what you want, Naomi, because I'll give you anything, everything. I'll leave this life if that's what it takes. I'll disappear. I'll become someone new. Just tell me how to keep you." She crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. "I want you, not some sanitized version, not someone pretending to be normal. I want Li Wei, tattooed mafia boss with blood on his hands and love in his heart. I want the man who burns down the world to protect me. I want the man who looks at me like I'm his entire universe. I want you exactly as you are." "I'm dangerous," he whispered. "So am I," she smiled through tears. "I make you vulnerable, I distract you, I'm your weakness, and that terrifies me too, but I love you anyway. I love you impossibly, dangerously, completely." Li Wei surged up, kissing her like she was oxygen and salvation and home. "Marry me," he said against her lips. "I know it's insane, I know it's too fast, but marry me, Naomi. Let me protect you legally. Let me give you everything I have. Let me prove every single day that you're the best decision I've ever made." She should have hesitated, should have asked for time, but looking into his eyes, seeing the desperate hope and infinite love there, the answer was obvious. "Yes," she breathed, "yes, I'll marry you." His smile could have lit the entire city. The next few months transformed both their lives. Li Wei kept his word. He didn't abandon his organization, but he restructured it, moved away from the most violent operations, focused on legitimate businesses with gray area side ventures. He'd never be completely clean, but he could be cleaner for her. Naomi continued her journalism, but with a new focus, exposing corruption among the elite, giving voice to the powerless, investigating stories that actually mattered. With Li Wei's resources and protection behind her, she could pursue truth without fear. They were an unlikely pair, the mafia boss and the journalist, darkness and light, danger and integrity. But somehow, impossibly, they worked. The wedding was small and private. Held at sunset on a private beach with only Li Wei's trusted inner circle and Naomi's closest friends. She wore a simple white dress that showcased her curves, her natural hair adorned with delicate gold pins. Li Wei wore a black suit with his tattoos visible, looking every inch the powerful man he was. When he said his vows, voice rough with emotion, hands steady as he slipped the ring on her finger, Naomi saw tears in his eyes. "You saved me," he whispered just for her. "I was dead inside before you, now I'm alive, now I'm yours forever." "Forever," she agreed, sealing it with a kiss. Their first month of marriage was blissful, but peace never lasted long in Li Wei's world. A rival organization, the Jade Serpents, began making aggressive moves into his territory. They'd allied with several smaller gangs united by their desire to bring down the ghost, and they knew his weakness now. They knew about Naomi. Li Wei increased security, kept her close, but he couldn't lock her away completely. She had work, responsibilities, a life, and he'd promised not to cage her. One afternoon, Naomi was at the community center when the attack came. Armed men burst in, targeting her specifically, but they'd underestimated her. Weeks of self-defense training from Li Wei's best fighters had prepared her. She fought back, got the children to safety, and managed to trigger the silent alarm Li Wei had installed. He arrived within minutes, a hurricane of controlled violence. His men secured the perimeter while he systematically took down every attacker. When it was over, he pulled Naomi into his arms, checking her for injuries with frantic hands. "I'm okay," she kept saying. "Li Wei, I'm okay, I fought them off." Pride and terror warred in his expression. "You're incredible," he said roughly, "and I'm going to end this. Tonight I'm going to make sure no one ever threatens you again." Li Wei called a meeting of all the major players, his allies, neutral parties, and even representatives from the Jade Serpents. The venue was neutral ground, a luxury hotel conference room with armed guards from multiple factions. Tensions were sky-high, one wrong word could start a war. Li Wei stood at the head of the table, Naomi beside him, a deliberate statement. She wasn't hidden, she wasn't protected in the shadows, she was his partner, his equal, his strength. "You came after my wife," Li Wei said, his voice cold and clear. "You crossed the one line I told you never to cross, so here's what's going to happen. You have two choices: back down and accept my terms, or fight me and lose everything." "You can't threaten all of us," the Jade Serpent leader sneered. "I'm not threatening." Li Wei's smile was terrible. I'm promising. I've spent the last month systematically dismantling your operations. Your weapons suppliers, mine now. Your money laundering fronts, seized. Your blackmail material on city officials, I have copies. You came at me thinking I was weakened by love. You were wrong. Love made me more dangerous because now I have something worth destroying the world for. He placed a folder on the table, sliding it forward. This contains evidence of every illegal operation you've ever run. One word from me and it goes to the authorities, the honest ones I've cultivated relationships with. You'll all spend the rest of your lives in prison. Or you can take my deal, cease all operations in my territory, pay reparations for the damage you've caused, and never threaten my family again. Silence. The Jade Serpent leader's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. Try me, Li Wei said softly. Hurt what's mine and I'll show you exactly what the ghost is capable of. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. One by one, the rival leaders nodded their acceptance. They had no choice. Li Wei had outplayed them completely. When the meeting ended, Naomi squeezed his hand. That was terrifying and impressive, she whispered. I meant every word, he pulled her close. I will always protect you, always. 6 months later, Naomi stood in Li Wei's penthouse, staring at a pregnancy test with shaking hands. Positive. Joy and terror flooded through her in equal measure. A baby. They were going to have a baby. She and this beautiful, dangerous, impossible man were creating a life together. When Li Wei came home that evening, she was waiting in the living room, nerves making her hands tremble. What's wrong? He asked immediately, crossing to her. Are you hurt? Did something happen? I'm pregnant, she blurted out. He froze, completely froze, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. Li Wei, say something. We're having a baby, his voice cracked on the last word. Yes. A baby, he repeated it like he was testing the word. Our baby. Are you okay with this? In answer, he dropped to his knees in front of her, pressing his forehead against her still flat stomach. His shoulders shook, and Naomi realized with shock that he was crying. This powerful mafia boss was on his knees, weeping with joy. I never thought I'd have this, he said roughly. A family, a real family, something pure and good and mine. Naomi, you've given me everything. She ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling. We're going to be parents. I'm going to be a father, wonder filled his voice. He looked up at her, his face wet but smiling. I'm going to be someone's father, and I swear to you I will be better. I will be the man our child deserves. I will build a world where they're safe and loved and free. You already are that man, Naomi assured him. You've been that man since the moment you chose me. The little girl had her mother's rich brown skin and her father's dark eyes. She also had her father wrapped completely around her tiny finger. Sarah, Li Wei said patiently, crouching down to his daughter's level. We don't pull Uncle Chen's hair, remember? The toddler giggled, unrepentant, her chubby hands reaching for her father's face instead. Li Wei caught them gently, kissing her fingers, his expression so tender it made Naomi's heart ache. She watched from the doorway of their new home, a sprawling house outside the city with gardens and security and space for their growing family. Li Wei had scaled back his operations even further after Sora's birth, focusing on legitimate businesses and spending every possible moment with his wife and daughter. He'd kept his promises, he'd changed, grown, become more than the ghost. He was a husband, a father, a man who'd found redemption in love. You're starring, Li Wei said without looking up, a smile in his voice. I'm appreciating, Naomi corrected, crossing to them. Sora immediately reached for her and Naomi scooped her up, breathing in her baby scent. Can you believe this is our life? Li Wei stood, wrapping his arms around both of them. Every day, he said softly, every single day I wake up and can't believe I get to have this. You two are my entire world. We love you too, Naomi whispered, standing on her toes to kiss him. Sora made a disgusted noise. At 2, she'd already decided kissing was gross, and they both laughed, the sound filling their home with warmth and light. Once upon a time, Naomi had stumbled into a warehouse and met a dangerous man with darkness in his soul. She'd been terrified, intrigued, impossibly drawn to him. They'd fought and loved and nearly destroyed each other in the process. But in the end, love had won, not the safe, easy kind of love that poets romanticized. The dangerous, messy, all-consuming kind that changed everything. The kind that made a mafia boss kneel. The kind that made a journalist believe in second chances, the kind that built families and futures from blood and broken pieces. And as Naomi stood there in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the impossible family she'd never expected but always wanted, she understood one fundamental truth. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a knife or power. Sometimes it's love. And they'd wielded it well.